So a botnet is different than isolated pieces of malware in the fact that a botnet is a collection of infected machines which are coordinated through command and control by a central server, which is called the command and control server or the CNC server. So the power of botnets is basically in the amount of distributed computation and storage power that is available to a CNC server.
It's short for robot, is it then, I'm guessing?
Yeah, so the bot is basically for machines that can operate in an automated fashion, which refers to the robot thing that we mentioned.
Okay, and a botnet is a collection of these that somebody's using for nefarious purposes. Would that be right, or does it have to be?
Yeah, usually it is for nefarious purposes. So the main two strengths of a botnet from the point of view of a bad guy is one, that there are like bots on the order of hundreds and thousands of machines. So there is a lot of distributed computing and storage power available there. And the other one is a certain delegation of responsibility or deniability, which the infrastructure affords to the person who runs the botnet, in terms of that the person conducts all these nefarious activities from the platform of the bots and not just directly. Usually people are not aware, and basically stealth and botnets usually go hand in hand, because from the point of view of a CNC server, it wants to ensure that the bots remain infected and available and stay that way for the longest period of time possible. So if the user is aware that it has been infected, then typically they would probably reinstall the operating system or take other measures to clean the machine, which doesn't work in the favor of the botnet controller.
I'm assuming this starts from people opening dodgy emails or something. Is that the sort of thing that starts this off for an innocent user sitting there using their computer?
So every botnet has a propagation mechanism, and nothing is stopping it from using multiple propagation vectors. So for example, a botnet can spread itself in passive ways or in active ways. So active ways usually involve little or no user intervention, basically no user intervention, in the sense that if a machine has been infected, then the bot binary has inherent mechanisms to find other hosts on the internet to infect. For example, by scanning for hosts that have known vulnerabilities that can be exploited. And then there are passive mechanisms that require some degree of user intervention. For example, drive-by downloads, which are websites that have, say, some active content like JavaScript or ActiveX controls. So just a user, when he or she visits the website, the installation of the malware takes place in an automated fashion.
So just because they visited that website, the website might be doing something that they think, oh look, Flash active, this, that or the other, and fancy graphics, but in the background it could be doing something much more serious.
Yeah, and there are other passive ways also. I mean, social engineering is a very powerful way of spreading malware in general, especially botnets, which involves some kind of human interaction to convince a user to take steps that they would otherwise not do. For example, a pop-up thing that pops up and says, you have won a lottery. Click on this link to claim the money. And you click on the link and it initiates the download of the malware to your machine. And then we also have propagation mechanisms like media, for example, USB sticks, which is potentially very powerful because it allows the infection to spread to private networks which are otherwise inaccessible over the internet. I mean, usually the malicious binary is in the form of an executable. So it just starts running, right? Like it doesn't need you to double click it.
Where does the command machine come in? Is that being controlled by someone, or is that itself a bot?
So I think we can make use of some diagrams here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so here's the CNC server here, and here is the user, the innocent user. Say that through whatever propagation vector, either through clicking on some bad links or through some infected media, the user installs the malicious software which is associated with the botnet. Usually it's called the bot binary. Binary means the executable code which can be directly run by the machine without the need to be compiled. By installing the bot binary, the user has got the infection, but it is not formally part of the botnet now. It needs to find some way to locate this CNC server to be able to exchange messages with it. So it needs some rallying mechanism. Now, the rallying mechanism can take place in the form of an IP address. That is, the IP address can be hard-coded into the bot binary, or the user can obtain a seed list of IP addresses, which would be basically IP addresses of some other hosts which know how to locate the CNC server. So basically like a stepping stone between the CNC server and the user to locate the CNC server. Apart from IP address, the user could also potentially use some domain name related to the CNC server, and the domain name could likewise be hard-coded into the bot binary, or the user can make use of some algorithm which is known to the user and to the CNC server to generate predictable domain names which are then associated with the CNC server. Either way, once the user finds out how to communicate with the CNC server, it connects to it. Now the user is formally part of the botnet and it has kind of registered itself with the botnet. So typically, if the CNC server wants the bots to carry out certain nefarious activities on its behalf, it is able to access that particular bot. Now, the purposes for which these bots can be used are different. For example, the bots can be used for the purpose of information gathering, which involves sensitive information like passwords, credit card information, or information which is not of a financial nature but still valuable, for example, intellectual property. The other purpose for which the botnet can use its bots is for distributed computing. For example, distributed password cracking, getting bots to solve CAPTCHAs, basically anything that requires proof of work and is infeasible for the bot master, the person who controls the botnet, to carry out individually. It can distribute it across the recruited bots and get them to do it on its behalf.
And is this, the CNC machine is obviously under the control of whoever the bot master is?
Yeah.
Is that usually their own computer, or is that again remote from them? So is there? I was wondering if there was a way of tracing them.
Yes. So it would be very naive of a bot master to directly use its own machine for the CNC purposes. And usually how it evades detection is to incorporate several stepping stones between itself and the machine. And for example, it could log into that machine or access that machine using the Tor network. So that way it is using that machine anonymously and remove all traces of its identity and basically be untraceable.
How many botnets are actually operating on the internet at the moment? Can anyone hazard a guess at those numbers, or?
It's hard to say because I mean, how can you count the number of bots that are controlled, right? Like, if it's a centralized botnet and there is, say, one or like a limited number of CNC servers, in one specific case, they looked at all the incoming connections to the CNC server, which kind of helped them estimate the footprint of the botnet, which is the number of bots that formed part of the botnet. But who knows if there are other CNC servers related to the same botnet, because, you know, like looking from the vantage point of one CNC server would afford you visibility into only its own footprint. So there have been academic studies on estimates of botnet footprints, but one cannot really be completely accurate about that.
Is there any way that kind of technology can be used for good, or is it always for nefarious reasons?
Well, it's kind of being used for the good in the context of censorship-resistant systems, where good users are trying to access some content which has been banned in their country, using more or less the same evasive measures which are used by botnets or malware to evade security people. So it's the same model turned upside down.
By subtracting these frames from each other, we can virtually shroud the influence of daylight. So we can even eliminate cast shadows which would be cast.